And Chicago band A Flor de Piel connects new generations with their twist on traditional Mexican folk music. For some of today's top stories, the Illinois State Rifle Association files a legal challenge to the state's ban on so-called assault weapons and extended magazines. Barely a week after Governor J.B. Pritzker signed the law, the ISRA and other pro-gun groups filed a federal lawsuit claiming the ban infringes on their Second Amendment rights. The lawsuit seeks to have the ban deemed unconstitutional and prevent state officials from enforcing it. A number of county sheriffs across Illinois have already said they won't fully enforce the new law.
A debt ceiling standoff in Washington. With the U.S. government set to reach its spending limit as soon as tomorrow, Republicans in Congress are insisting they will not vote to raise the debt limit without corresponding spending cuts. The White House insists it will not negotiate over the debt ceiling.
The debt limit has been something that has happened 3 times. If you look at just the last administration in a bipartisan way, this is an easy one. This is something that should be happening without conditions.
The federal debt currently stands at more than $31 trillion. Although the debt limit may soon be breached, the Department of Treasury is expected to take special measures to delay an actual default for at least a few months. We'll have more on this coming up in the program.
The Chicago Bulls have been taking in the sights of Paris ahead of their game against the Detroit Pistons tomorrow. Earlier today, the squad enjoyed a visit to the Eiffel Tower and took some obligatory selfies. And Bulls forward Derek Jones Jr. also took advantage of the team's time in the City of Love to propose to his girlfriend, Shakara. She said yes, in case you were wondering. Bulls fans will be hoping the good vibes and brief European trip will help kickstart a so far underwhelming season.
Congrats to them.
When are we bringing Chicago tonight to Paris?
We're working to Paris. We have Paris. Coming up in the program, details into the first city council meeting of the new year as the mayor's ethics track record takes center stage.
The first utility giants seeking rate hikes, how that will impact your bill right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois utilities want to charge customers more for delivering natural gas and electricity. Amanda Vinicky is here with a look at what's driving these requests and what it could mean for your bills. Amanda, I guess it means they might go higher.
Yeah, Paris, from natural gas to electricity in Chicago, the suburbs, and downstate. If utilities get their way, consumer costs will go up.
What's happening right now is that basically every major gas and electric utility in Illinois is filing for a rate increase at once.
What's behind the increases depends on who you talk to. The companies have their reasons. Consumer advocates like Abe Scar with the Illinois Public Interest Research Group have other theories. At least part of it, though, hinges on changing state regulations. Now, it is important to understand those regulations here. Utilities cannot set their own prices because they're virtual monopolies. They have to make their case to state regulators with the Illinois Commerce Commission. The commission decides how much they can charge.
And how much more are these companies looking to charge?
Well, in each case, we're looking at increases that will eventually lead to double-digit adds on consumer bills.
Nicor, this is the largest gas utility in the state that serves most of northern Illinois outside of Chicago. They're asking for a $321 million increase. That'd be about $12 per month for the average customer, or over $111 per year. And I would note that's on top of, again, 3 rate hikes in just 4 years recently, increasing rates by 77%. That actually would be the biggest rate increase in history. It was when they made it, but it was one-upped by Peoples Gas just days later.
Peoples Gas is requesting a $402 million rate increase, which works out to roughly $12 increase a month or $142 a year. Both companies have their justifications. In the case of Nicor, the company says it realizes the impact any rate increase can have on customers and does not make this request lightly. However, this rate increase is necessary to run our business due to inflation and rising global impacts that continue to affect our operating and maintenance costs. Peoples Gas is focusing on reliability, saying that the filing ensures Chicagoans will continue to have the safe, reliable, environmentally sustainable energy they depend on. especially when temperatures drop to 0 and below, as they did during the recent holiday cold snap. In a statement, Peoples downplays the effect this increase will have on customers, saying that it is not expected to lead to a higher bill for a typical customer. Now, you may wonder, how on earth could that be? Peoples says it is because the price of natural gas itself is forecast to go down. So with its increase on the delivery side of natural gas, bills could stay flat. Now, that is something else that's really important to understand about all of this. We're not talking about the price of gas and electricity itself. Nicor, Peoples, and ComEd charge and then make money by delivering energy. These charges have to do solely with the cost of distribution and infrastructure and pipes and transmission lines. Scar says consumers, though, beware.
This past year, we saw significant increases in the cost both of electricity and of gas. And so consumers have felt that in the bills they're paying. And those may go down in the future years. They go up and down. You know, these are global commodities, and there's a lot that influence their price. What we do know with these proposals is the delivery side of your bill, if the utilities get their way, is going to go up significantly. And so when the price of gas spikes again, as it inevitably will, or the price of electricity spikes, as it may, we're going to be hit harder because you've already increased one side of your bill. And so the increase on your other side of your bill is just going to hit that much harder.
Last but not least, that ComEd request of $1.5 billion spread over 4 years. That would amount to $4.25 more a month annually. So come 2024, consumers would be looking at a $17 a month increase for, again, just the delivery of electricity. The company is also downplaying that, saying that the average residential bill would be less than it has been in other states. ComEd CEO says these proposed investments are necessary to deliver the resilient 24/7 power our customers depend on, prepare the grid for fleets of electric vehicles and electrification, integrate more clean energy and battery storage, and equitably advance a decarbonized energy future. The Citizens Utility Board is skeptical. Its director says making strategically smart, consumer-friendly grid improvements can help save customers money in the long run, but that shouldn't mean ComEd gets an excessive profit rate for shareholders. CUB will do a thorough review, but it's immediately clear that the utility giant wants an excessive profit rate for shareholders. CUB promises to scrutinize and challenge what it says is every penny the company can't justify. Perg Scar says the same, especially, he says, considering that come March, some of ComEd's former top honchos are set to go on trial for their role in a bribery scheme connected to former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. They've all pleaded not guilty, but the corporation itself admitted to the scheme. Scar says included in ComEd's ask is a profit increase of over 10%. He calls it a head scratcher that ComEd's in a position to raise rates higher than before, and in so doing, making an even bigger profit.
It's crazy to me that ComEd is positioned to do so well given their behavior over the last decade.
He says ComEd is poised to make out like bandits. Per recently released court documents, former Speaker Madigan used that very phrase to describe how well his associates were doing after he had allegedly arranged to hook them up with lucrative jobs and contracts at ComEd. Scar says pipes and the electric grid do need to be maintained. He says the question is, are customers getting enough a benefit for the cost? He says People's gas pipe replacement program has been out of control and has not addressed safety risk with pipes. And he says while he does support the energy transition for electrification, he says all of that investment doesn't have to be made now. It's not like everyone will have an electric car within the next few years. Now, rate cases, Paris, last 11 months, so it will be a while before commissioners make a final decision on what these rates might be.
As memory serves, Amanda, the ICC usually approves these rates, so we'll see how that goes over the next year. Thanks very much.
We'll be certainly watching.
All right, and we'll see you again later in the show for some Spotlight Politics. And now to Brandis for details on City Council's first meeting of the new year. Brandis.
Paris, it was all yays for more protection for trans people and those seeking abortions at today's City Council meeting. But the new measure may have been overshadowed by concerns about campaign ethics after the mayor's campaign staff last week emailed educators to recruit student volunteers. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, of course, you broke this story a week ago today. The mayor again apologizing for those emails, trying to move forward. Let's take a listen.
It was a mistake for our campaign work to reach out. We said that very clearly. I stepped out and I own that. And I don't have any further information at this time.
Heather, what's the latest on this issue?
Well, after she delivered that first apology, we learned that the City College of Chicago's officials had informed Lightfoot's campaign that a group of emails sent all the way back in August violated their ethics policy and told them not to do it again. We asked the mayor if her campaign had gotten that admonishment and why did she send another round of emails in January. She said that the campaign got nothing in writing from the city colleges. I reached back out to the city colleges to figure out what happened and have not yet heard back.
Okay, so after these emails created a firestorm, you took a deep dive into Lightfoot's record on ethics. What'd you find?
Well, for somebody who campaigned directly on this issue in 2019, she has governed more like an old school machine politician than somebody who is a reformer. Now, she pushes back on that characterization, saying she passed in July of 2019 one of the toughest ethics reforms packages in Chicago's history. That may be true, but she has clashed frequently with Chicago's watchdog, and last year she pushed back against another ethics reform package and actually rewrote it in a way that benefited at least two of her allies.
Of course. So after the city council meeting, Lightfoot rejected the suggestion that she might be trailing in the polls. How does this controversy impact her bid for re-election?
Well, it means that she can't campaign on ethics like she did in 2019, which really took off like a rocket after Alderman Egg Burke was clearly the center of a federal investigation. So that is not going to be her path to a second term in office. Can she find another path? We've got about another month to see.
yeah, to find something else to run on. As we mentioned, the city council today voted unanimously to expand protections for those who are seeking abortions and gender-affirming care. What will this new law do?
Well, it will prevent Chicago landlords and Chicago employers from discriminating against people who seek abortion care or gender-affirming care, and it gives the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, as well as the city's Office of Labor Standards, the power to investigate those complaints and levy fines if necessary.
Okay, Heather Sharon, thanks so much. Of course, we'll see you again in just a little bit for some Spotlight Politics.
Thanks, Brandis.
And of course, you can visit our website to read Heather's full story about the expanded protections for trans Chicagoans and those seeking abortions, and her story about Lightfoot's ethics track record. It is all on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now to Paris for a look at a key deadline that's looming. Paris.
Yeah, Brandon, it seems to have become an annual occurrence, the inevitable political stare down over the U.S. government's debt ceiling. The last time Congress raised the debt ceiling in December 2021, they did so to the tune of $2.5 trillion, setting the ceiling at $31.4 trillion. But that limit is about to come and go, which means the U.S. can't borrow anymore and will be strapped to pay its bills if Congress doesn't authorize more spending. And that, in turn, could set off a worldwide economic meltdown. And here to explain is Adam Clark Joseph, finance professor at the University of Illinois. Adam Clark Joseph, thanks for joining us. So, a primer here. What exactly is the debt ceiling, and why does Congress have this authority to either raise it or keep it where it's at?
So the debt ceiling is a limit on the total amount of debt that the U.S. government is permitted to have outstanding. And it was imposed or introduced in 1917 as a form of fiscal discipline
to rein in spending, rein in borrowing, to not have the U.S. government just borrow and borrow. Because there are some countries that don't have a ceiling at all. Denmark, although it doesn't seem like they have as much debt per GDP that the U.S. has. So we mentioned the consequence. What are the consequences of not lifting the ceiling and thus not allowing the U.S. government to borrow anymore?
Well, so in the very short run, things will be okay. You can rest somewhat easy on that regard. The Treasury has, so if we hit the debt ceiling and if Congress doesn't raise it, then the government will no longer be able to issue any debt or borrow. So we'll have to fund everything with just its cash on hand or its current inflows, and it can't really do that. It doesn't. The numbers don't quite work out.
There's a lot more spending than money on hand without issuing debt. So to that point, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is saying they're going to triage this for the next 6 months if it happens, and they'll avoid a default. What are the different things they can do?
So there are some funds that are earmarked for future obligations, things like retirement, and not Social Security. These are the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund and the Postal Service Retiree Benefits Fund. They can temporarily stop putting money into those, instead divert that money to kind of current expenditures. And they can even temporarily sell some of the assets that they'd put into those funds, and then just catch up with those after the debt ceiling is eventually lifted.
All right, so a lot of little tools they have, but as you mentioned, it doesn't seem like this would really solve the problem for very long unless the debt ceiling's raised. So what are the broader economic consequences as it relates to the stock market, as it relates to the economy, as it relates to jobs and the global markets?
It would be awful, like really, really disastrously bad if the United States defaulted. I mean, we would see the stock market decline significantly. We would see the dollar drop relative to other currencies by wide margin. We'd see government borrowing become much more costly, which would mean basically our tax dollars wouldn't go as far. And really, we'd see kind of chaos throughout the global financial system. It's not really a scenario that anybody would want to see.
Pretty ugly on all fronts, but again, we have this stare down, this game of chicken every year, and it might be more pronounced this year given some of the so-called Freedom Caucus members in the Republican Party and some of the things they're demanding. Remind us why this becomes such a political football all the time.
Well, so it started out as a mechanism that was well-intentioned and was actually a little bit more efficient than the way they were doing things, which involved dealing with each individual debt separately. But it is, I don't know, kind of a Frankenstein's monster of sorts, in that no one wants to be remembered as the legislator who was in favor of unlimited debt. So nobody really wants to be the one to get rid of this thing, but because it gets bumped up after some nail biting each time, it's no longer much of a disciplining device, and it creates this very tense and high stakes encounters. So,
which is what it seems like we're leading to right now. All right, Adam Clark Joseph, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And up next, new technology that's alarming school leaders across the country, so stay with us.
Catch your favorite show at a new time. Chicago Tonight, every weeknight at 10 p.m., starting January 23rd on WTTW.
There's a new technology that can answer questions, generate essays, and even write scientific papers, all from a short prompt.
As Mary browsed the fruit stands at the farmer's market, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched.
Those words were generated by a new artificial intelligence-powered chatbot known as ChatGPT. It's prompted some school districts to block access to the chatbot on its networks, while others are weighing its value in the education system. Here to discuss ChatGPT as it gains traction is Christian Hammond, professor of computer science at Northwestern University. He's also the director of the Center for Advancing Safety in Machine Intelligence. Chris, welcome back and thanks for joining us. So this new technology, it is fairly new. What exactly is ChatGPT?
ChatGPT is something that's called a large language model. And what it is a system that was built by training a computer on not just hundreds, not just thousands, but millions upon millions of documents. And what it ends up learning is the relationship between words. And so what it can do is, when you ask it a question, it will find the words that make sense to it from a statistical point of view as an answer to that question.
So how does one access it or use it if I were to go online to try and access this compared to like a search engine like Google?
Well, right now it's been released for use by the company that built it, OpenAI, and you sign up for it. You still have to sign up for it, and then you just have access to a thing that you can ask questions of it. You can give it prompts to tell it what to write. And what it will do is, based upon the context of that language in your prompt, and in fact past prompts, it will try to find the language that works in terms of what an answer should look like. The thing that's interesting about it is that it doesn't know about truth or falsehood. It doesn't know about the world at all. It knows about the relationships between words, and that's what drives it.
So it can't check facts for you, because a primary concern among educators with ChatGPT's ability to generate whole essays for students, how effective is this for writing essays or articles, for example?
I mean, they always sound good, but they will often be filled with things that just aren't true. So we asked it to, at one point, write an article about our master's program in artificial intelligence. And to use a phrase that almost everyone uses when they talk about it, it was decent. But it missed two facts, and one was particularly important. It said, oh, the program lasts for 2 years. And it doesn't. It lasts for 15 months. But most master's programs in computer science are for 2 years. And so from a statistical point of view, that made sense to it. And that's what it ended up saying. That's where it ended up putting the text. And in general, it will put in things that sound true and are, from a statistical point of view, are more likely to be true than the truth itself often.
So New York and LA schools, two of the largest school systems in the country, they have already blocked ChatGPT on school computers and networks. Chicago Public Schools, they're not currently blocking it on the school's networks, but says that the chatbot is under review for potential risks to students, and also saying that the district has to balance the need for making sure that students have access to emerging technology. What could be the potential benefits of using something like this in learning and education?
I think that it could be like an exceptionally great tool for education. So the way it's structured is you give it what's called a prompt, and you can put anything you want in that prompt, and you can ask it to write a story about a bar fight in the form of a Hemingway story. That little snippet that you showed was the first few sentences of a short horror story about buying fruit where nothing scary happens. And the ability to actually take what you want said and express it, that is to explain your goals in terms of communication to a machine, that's actually a skill that is going to be incredibly important. And we call it prompt engineering. And my guess is within 3 months, we're going to have prompt engineering as a job title. The other thing is that it will generate things that may or may not be true. And I think that the notion of just saying, no, you can't use it, is not nearly as powerful as saying, No, we're going to actually make you use it. You're going to have to explain how you're steering it with your prompts. And then for everything it says, you need to do fact checking on it. And in fact, you have to correct it grammatically. And suddenly you have a world in which we're training our students how to take their goals and make them real, and train them to be critical in terms of their reading.
So more incorporating it into learning rather than blocking it entirely. We're almost out of time, Chris, and I want to ask about this. There's been research into the labor that OpenAI, which is ChatGPT's creator, that they've used to filter out speech about violence, sexual assault, and racism. Time magazine reporting that the company paid workers in Kenya less than $2 an hour for reading and filtering what ended up being some harmful copy. Is this the kind of work that might be rampant in developing this kind of technology? How could something like that have happened in about 30 seconds?
It's not that it might be rampant. It is rampant. For every single large-scale machine learning system, you are going to find companies using incredibly cheap labor to sort of fix them, to filter them, or to give commentary on them, or to tag things in them. It is a problem the tech community has not yet faced.
Okay, good to point out. Chris Hammond, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh no, thank you. This was fantastic.
Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, we talk about gender-affirming health care in light of new state protections from legal action across state lines. Our Spotlight Politics team on the barrage of lawsuits challenging the state's new assault weapons ban.
It's like music, it just like transcends time and language.
And Chicago band A Flor de Piel connects new generations with their twist on traditional Mexican folk music. First, some more of today's top stories. A man with special needs is in critical condition at Stroger Hospital after being shot while waiting for a school bus early this morning. Police found the 21-year-old man unresponsive after responding to a call of shots being fired. The victim was shot 3 times, once in the head while waiting for the bus with his father and younger brother in the back of the Yards neighborhood. Police say at least 3 gunmen opened fire on them.
These offenders likely thought that the victims were rival gang members. It is important to note that none of the family involved, the father nor the 15-year-old nor the 21-year-old victim, have any gang affiliation whatsoever. No one should be shot, let alone shot while standing waiting for a school bus. No father should see his children shot like this.
Detectives at Area 1 are investigating, and police are asking for more information about the shooting. City leaders are cracking down on teen vaping. The City Council today voted unanimously in favor of a proposal aimed at reducing vaping by Chicago teens. The proposal doubles the penalty for selling tobacco products to people younger than 21, with each offense now carrying a maximum fine of $10,000. Stores that make more than 20% of their income from vaping products will now need special permission from the city. And the measure also bans the use of electronic cigarettes in retail tobacco stores, requires businesses to keep records of tobacco and e-cigarette sales. The U.S. Department of Labor fines Amazon for worker safety violations at a Waukegan warehouse. The department issued the citation after inspections at the Waukegan facility and others in New York and Florida. OSHA investigators say workers were at high risk for lower back injuries and other musculoskeletal disorders from having to repeatedly lift heavy packages. In a statement, OSHA says Amazon's work processes were, quote, designed for speed, not safety. Amazon has 15 days to contest the findings or comply and pay a $60,000 fine. A lot of states are outlawing and even criminalizing so-called gender-affirming care. Illinois is going in the opposite direction. Patients coming to Illinois seeking gender-affirming health care are now getting more protections from potential legal action coming from across state lines. These protections are part of a bill recently signed into law by Governor J.B. Pritzker. And joining us is Jay Rice, interim CEO of Brave Space Alliance, which is the first black and trans-led LGBTQ plus center located on the city's south side. Jay Rice, welcome to Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. First off, give us a primer on what exactly gender-affirming care encompasses.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Paris. What gender affirming care encompasses is any sort of medical or social care that will allow trans folks and any person really to feel more affirmed in their gender. So that can be anything from breast augmentations and a plethora of different surgeries that can happen. But ultimately, we're talking about procedures that help, for the most part, trans folks feel more affirmed in their gender.
And many clinical organizations and even pediatric organizations are very supportive of gender-affirming care, not or specifically because of its mental health implications. So tell me the mental health implications of being able to receive this kind of care.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, especially with children and younger people, the suicide rates are 4 times higher for younger trans folks and older trans folks. So being able to receive care that's going to help you feel seen and whole and affirmed will hopefully mitigate any thoughts of suicide that can creep up when you are experiencing gender dysphoria and things of that nature.
And gender dysphoria being sort of the clinical term for someone that feels that they are the different gender than the physical body that they were born into. So that said, there are several states, as you know, that have banned this kind of care, even criminalized it. What impact has that had on trans and gender nonconforming folks?
I mean, it's had a grave impact on transgender nonconforming folks. And it is, we're very grateful and thankful to live in Illinois where we are accepting those medical refugees, because this is ultimately what they are. These are medical refugees who are being criminalized for wanting procedures that's going to help them feel whole and affirmed. So we've seen a lot of trans folks and a lot of parents of trans youth coming to Illinois to get those different procedures done, to be able to have access to testosterone and estrogen and hormones and things like that. So we've definitely seen an increase and an uptick of medical refugees finding asylum here in Illinois.
And basically, that's sort of the thrust of the governor signing this bill in the House and Senate passing this bill is to protect folks that come from out of state from any legal action from those states. So just give us sort of the 411 on what exactly this bill does.
Exactly. So yes, it protects them from facing any sort of legal actions or convictions when they do travel back to the state that they came from. It allows Illinois to also mitigate any sort of criminal actions that they may want Illinois as a state to take against these people who are trying to find gender affirming care too.
And you mentioned that your organization is seeing more people from across state lines. Is there any particular state or any area that you're seeing the most folks from?
Well, you know, our neighboring states like Indiana is definitely a state that we see a lot of people coming to seek medical asylum for sure.
And it's not just the medical care. What are some of the other resources your group and other groups provide?
Yeah, so my groups and other groups like us, we have things like our community pantry, which we provide. We have a lot of self-care items because at Brave Space, we believe that self-care is healthcare. So we have those items available like our barber shop and our nail salon and things like that we offer. We also offer job employment help as well. So, you know, our goal at BSA is to make sure that we are looking at folks, especially Black trans individuals, holistically and providing them with the tools that they need to thrive instead of just surviving.
And how about in the Black community or communities of color? I mean, how much more difficult is it?
A lot more. You know, I think we have to acknowledge that intersectionality exists. And for trans folks of color, it's a lot harder because we are facing also racial inequities too, along with a lot of anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation that we've seen an uptick in and just overall oppression. So, you know, we're kind of getting two ends of a horrible stick here where we are facing racial inequities along with gender inequities as well.
Is there an age that and there's a lot of debate, and I don't want to be insensitive about this, but is there an age where gender affirming care perhaps is not appropriate? You know, folks talk about, well, maybe it's more appropriate for youth to wait until they're older.
So my answer for that is at any appropriate age, any age is appropriate because when we're talking about gender affirming care as a whole, we're not always talking about surgeries and hormones. Sometimes we're talking about social transitioning as well. So whether that is calling folks by their preferred names, using their preferred pronouns, and acknowledging and perpetuating them to have the freedom to dress and have an outward expression of however they want, that is also considered gender affirming care too. So I think at any age that's appropriate.
So it's a holistic approach here, gender affirming care, kind of encompassing a lot of different things, medical and non-medical. All right, Jay Rice, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. And up next, our Spotlight Politics team on campaign cash in the mayor's race. But first, we take a look at the weather.
The state's week-old ban on so-called assault weapons is challenged in a downstate court today, and the governor positions himself on an international and well-heeled stage. All this and much more in tonight's Spotlight Politics. Welcome back, our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Venicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. Welcome back, everybody. So the state's new assault weapons ban in court today as more legal challenges are taking shape. Amanda, this case was brought by a Republican who ran unsuccessfully for Attorney General. History of challenging the Illinois Democrats' restrictions. Tell us about him and the case that he's bringing.
So yeah, Tom DeVore, as you noted, really made a name for himself and won that nomination after fighting COVID restrictions and executive orders put down by Governor J.B. Pritzker. He didn't have a ton of success in the courts there, but that has not stopped him from filing more cases then and now. This is on behalf of gun owners and a gun shop, including one in Effingham where this case was heard. He has several arguments, namely that there were procedural problems with how this legislation was passed and that there's going to be irreparable harm suffered on behalf of some of these owners. It is not the only case. This is the quickest one. He's seeking a temporary restraining order, which basically would mean that while this goes through the courts, there is no assault weapons ban in Illinois. That is what he is seeking. But this is, for sure, not the only case that is to be filed. You have a lot of the big names in gun rights that are coming together and expect to file one soon. And then also already the State Rifle Association has filed a case, and there are, again, some other entities that are involved in that. And they are making the argument that, for example, the limits on magazines of guns, that's something that's just impractical because there are rules where you can't outlaw guns that are too common, and they're saying that this it breaches that also by requiring those who currently own these guns, that requiring them to register, that would be self-incrimination. So there's a lot of legal back and forth.
When might we expect a ruling on a temporary restraining order?
That would probably come sooner than later from this judge out of Effingham. We could even, in fact, expect it by the end of this week.
All right, Heather, the Supreme Court weighed in on a New York gun control law today. What does the decision mean for the future of Illinois' law?
Well, most observers think that the law is probably more vulnerable in the federal courts than it is in the state courts, because, of course, the state courts have to decide what the state constitution means, and we know that the United States Supreme Court has 6 conservative justices, and they have signaled a willingness to sort of overturn gun control measures. However, they declined to do so in a case involving a New York state law, which was not the same, but sort of in the same sort of ballpark. And the fact that they did not stop it from going into effect, I think observers will point to that and say that perhaps the Supreme Court feels like it has moved fast enough on gun issues, and that could allow Illinois' law to stand in the federal courts if it withstands the state challenge.
Let's just state the obvious. The Second Amendment is totally confusing. It makes no sense the way it's written. Starting with the clause, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of free state, comma, the right to keep and bear arms. So folks saying they know ironclad about its constitutionality, it's not accurate. The only thing we can say accurately is we just don't know. This is being litigated. And then there's a case in Maryland which kind of comes down to whether these style of weapons, so-called assault weapons, are commonly used in defense. This is a consideration. And that's kind of the crux of that case. So this is in the legal gray area. The sheriffs that say, I know that it's not constitutional, it's your opinion. We don't know at this point, and that's what's going to be litigated. I mean, it's going to be litigated forever because it's been interpreted 100 different ways over the last 100 years.
To decide whether or not it's constitutional, not a sheriff.
And real briefly, Brandis, just to be clear here, in terms of, for example, the Effingham case, you can have in state courts sort of a decision of where to file a case. So you might have a more friendly ruling in some place, such as a downstate county like this. Not saying that we are trying to make predictions about where the judge is going to go, but it is certainly possible. That said, we also know that something like this would more than likely rise to the state's high court, and that is very much in Democratic control.
Okay, so let's get to the mayor's race. Race for mayor gaining national attention today. Mayor Lightfoot was asked why her campaign commercials are just targeting Jesus Chuy Garcia and Paul Vallis.
I think we are in a place where we feel very good about where we are vis-a-vis the other candidates. My challenge and opportunity is to make sure that we continue talking to the voters about what we've done, and that's what we're doing. But of course, it's standard fare to make sure that you're defining the others who want to put a gloss on or spin a narrative that is inconsistent with their track record and reality. So that's what we're doing.
Heather, Mayor Lightfoot, she's trailing in the money race. Is she concerned about her fundraising not keeping up with her spending?
Well, she told us today that she wasn't worried about it, that she was confident she would have the money to stay up on television, as they say, until Election Day, which is almost a month away. And she said that she was right where they wanted to be, but the money race is really a wash at this point. Her, Jesus Chuy Garcia, Brandon Johnson, and Paul Vallis all pretty much have the same amount of money, which means they're on a level playing field. And then, of course, there's Willie Wilson, who has a cool $4 million from his own bank account that he can use to continue doing just about anything. That's sort of how the money tiers have shaken out. Whether that will mean sort of another candidate doesn't catch fire, they absolutely could, but that's where we are right now.
Paris, you know, money being what it is this race of 9 candidates, is it down to just those 3?
I think it would be a fool's errand to predict, you know, what the final outcome or what the runoff outcome is going to be this far in advance. But the thing to know is it's going to be a low turnout election by design. The municipal election, only a couple months from the midterms. The powers that be years and years and years ago designed it to protect incumbents. So it's going to be low turnout, which means the folks that do have the most money and can get their name out there in ads are going to be the ones that have an advantage. So there's got Brandon Johnson, who's got that teachers union money. Maybe he gets up on the air or on YouTube or whatever and makes a splash. And you mentioned Willie Wilson, who has bought a lot of goodwill, literally, you know, with gas cards and all of that.
Another grocery giveaway coming up, I believe.
So you don't really need that huge a percentage to get to a runoff.
Yeah, Brandon Johnson is up on TV, just to be clear, but his ads have all been sort of introductory ads. Here's who I am, here's who you know, what my story is. Somebody who's not up on TV, Chuy Garcia.
Amanda, meanwhile, there are new polls weekly with early voting starting next Thursday, which didn't we just have early voting like a couple of months ago? But talk about how much it matters who conducts the polls, because some of these aren't commissioned by the campaigns.
No, but you do need to look at when they are commissioned by the campaigns, if there is something known as a push poll, when they're really trying to get whoever is answering the questions to give a certain sort of response. And also, you need to look at things like, is it a reputable firm? You need to make sure what they have released. You look for things like crosstabs, and those are the sort of questions that a journalist should be asking before you go forward and report on a poll and say who's in front, who's in back. And yes, early voting does factor into the equation here, because while we have some time until the actual election, or at least the first round of it, what we don't have is a lot of time before people start to cast their ballots. And generally, those are going to be people, of course, who've done their research and have somebody that they are gung-ho for. Nonetheless, if you have balloting open early, that's where you say, all right, how much money do you have? Are you up on TV? What are you doing to raise name recognition? How are you doing in those early polls?
Heather, talk about the mayor's ethics missteps that we've been talking about since last week and how that's playing into the race.
Well, it means that she's not going to be able to run as a reformer. It just complicates that issue for her. And we talked earlier about sort of how her record really sort of belies what she sort of ran on in 2019, somebody who was going to break the grip of the corrupt political machine. The political machine, you know, it still exists. And the question is can she use another issue or another circumstance to sort of change this narrative that she's, you know, trailing in the polls and that she doesn't really have a ton of money. You know, there's not a lot of time left, so something's got to change for her. And I think the issue with these emails is that it, you know, basically it just eats up time.
Paris, the mayor ran on the platform to bring in the light, but does it seem that she's, functioning more like an old school politician?
Well, if you listen to some of the things that Heather brought up earlier in the show, and then the fact that she's jousted with the city's top watchdog all the time, or this issue with the police scanners where now no member of the media or no member of the public will be able to know what's going on in real time as it pertains to crime and what police are responding to, these run counter to a philosophy of being all about transparency. Now, she kind of meant that towards city council members, and so she kind of wielded the baton against them. But it's kind of do as I say, not as I do.
All right, so let's shift to state politics a little bit. Governor Pritzker is in Switzerland, where he spoke to an international delegation of politicians, business leaders, and some of the world's wealthiest people at the World Economic Forum about his leadership in Illinois. And he hasn't shied away from talking about national politics either.
I think that the president did an amazing job really, persevering very difficult circumstances with a couple of Democrats who really weren't working together with other members of the party. So I am glad that we got a lot done. I wish we could get more done, and I actually think that now that it's 51-49, we will get more done in the Senate. The problem, of course, now is Kevin McCarthy and the House.
So he's giving praise there, Paris, yet saying not enough. Is this a dig at the president or the House?
I don't think so. I think he was digging at not only Republicans, but also the two Democratic senators, Manchin and Sinema, who kind of gummed up the process a little bit, although Democrats were still able to pass things like climate and infrastructure and COVID relief. But I would have to imagine that if Joe Biden is going to run again and declare himself a candidate, no one's going to challenge him. At least not Governor Pritzker. So I think the criticism is all for Republicans from Pritzker there.
No matter how much money he's got, he's not going to challenge that.
There's a good article in the Tribune that he spent $350 million total in these races for governor. Just a cool $350 million.
Substantial amount. You probably just wrote a check, like just a $357 million check.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the Bears, because they welcomed the new president and CEO yesterday, making no bones about the team's desire to finalize the move to Arlington Heights. Here he is.
I know we're focused on Arlington Park and that stadium development project. I look forward to leaning in to the stadium development project, but I think the biggest thing we can do is to make sure that we're methodical, we're detailed, and we take the time to plan it properly.
So Paris, just last week, a slick rendering released of the revamped Soldier Field, sort of a Hail Mary attempt to keep the Bears in Chicago. It's not looking good.
It's like a Hail Mary on your own 1-inch line, and you've got 1 second left. No, I mean, it seems like the Bears are gone, but I don't know if city leaders are listening. I've made this point. The Bears don't want to deal with the Park District anymore. The Bears don't want to be in Soldier Field anymore. The Bears want to own their own stadium and their own experience and have all the revenue possibilities that come with that. So Arlington Heights is the best option for that. So the only chance that the city has to throw a Hail Mary that gets, bounced around and someone catches it in the end zone is to offer the Bears some plot of land where they can build their dream facility. It's still a huge long shot. But this looks pretty. I mean, it looks cool at Soldier Field, but this is not what the Bears are looking to hear if you really want to entice them.
It's not what they want.
Well, and it is spotlight politics, so let's say that the
politics of the Bears.
Let's say the Bears announce, look, we finalized the deal in Arlington Heights. We are leaving Chicago before Election Day. That could have a real impact on how people feel, not only about Lightfoot's leadership, but sort of the future of the city, because native Chicagoans will take it hard that they're leaving the lakefront for Arlington Heights. No shade to Arlington Heights. It's a lovely town. But it will hurt Chicago, and I think that will have unanticipated consequences for the election.
Which is why you have city leaders pulling out all of these stops, whether or not they are going to work, be effective. Lightfoot needs to do that. She needs to show that she is doing all that she can to keep the team in the city.
Well, and what is the likelihood that she can pull that off before February 28th?
It doesn't seem like, the Bears are going to close on this deal at some point in the first quarter of this year. It could be before then. It might not be. But, I know for a fact that developers and the city officials, they know this is a distinct possibility, and they are planning for a post-Bears future for Soldier Field. If anyone's ever been to Summerfest in Milwaukee, that whole
good times.
that would be a great concert festival
Paris
area.
Bench, huh?
know, why not? And Soldier Field would be the big venue and have a bunch of smaller venues just south of that.
So we've got like 30 seconds left, but Heather, would the mayor go ahead with this big, massive, expensive revamp of Soldier Field, even if the Bears are still leaving, maybe in the interest of attracting another team, like a soccer team or something, to Soldier Field?
I don't know where you would get the money for that, because there's clearly no appetite in Springfield for massive subsidies of this kind, and there's clearly no money in the city's coffers to pay for something like this, not to mention Chicago is still repaying the original renovation of Soldier Field debt. So
people hate it.
Yeah.
All right, that is Spotlight Gang. Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky, Paris Schutz. Thanks, y'all. And we're back with more right after this.
Film to walk in. Light cue.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. 10 o'clock. The sounds of Mexican folk music cross borders, generations, and genres and generations. Oftentimes, it's passed through families who play traditional music in celebrations and at home. Here in Chicago, a family band is keeping those beloved rhythms alive and thriving by infusing them with a modern sensibility. Here, Marisol Renato and 16-year-old Sage Cerrone, better known as A Flor de Piel, perform their spin on the classic Son Jarocho, La Bamba.
I've known it my entire life, from the movie La Bamba, where I was just excited to see someone that looked like me on the big screen. And then I started learning more information about it as I got older. Learning that it was 300 years old, and it was used as a call to escaped slaves, let them know to keep going up and up, to escape. I just love it.
Para bailar la bamba se necesita una poca de gracia. Una poca de gracia y otra cosita y arriba y arriba.
I wasn't technically like alive to remember it, but so 2007, 2008, the recession hit, and my parents were like, well, we need to make more money, but we also really love to play music. They had their whole show, and then I was born, and they brought me along to the shows, and when I could walk, I walked up to the stage, and I grabbed the microphone, and I just started singing gibberish, and then that's when I became a part of the group, so, yeah.
Bamba, bamba.
I didn't learn this music in Mexico, but when I moved here, I kind of like had that longing for that. So I kind of like went deep into learning all these different styles. But yes, especially when we met Sage, and she forced herself into our duo, duet, which became an official band member, that definitely brought in the younger vibe to our sound.
Even if you're just vibing along and grab a harana and jump to the song, and you know it's gonna be okay when you sing bamba, bamba like slave.
Music, it just like transcends time and language and all of that other stuff that gets in the way of like a connection to the soul. I love the folk songs and the tradition that we play, and adding the electronic aspect or adding rap or, you know, different genres going in there. It's a way to just connect more people.
It creates new experiences for us, and I think the other people also enjoy that. So I think that's what keeps us coming back for more.
You'll find more on A Flor de Piel on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Years after an Aldi grocery store left West Garfield Park, the community is now getting a new investment.
And concerns over toxic forever chemicals found in freshwater fish. What you need to know. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.